Welcome back. We have our beautiful website set up. It's time to create some functionality where we enter a URL, press detect, and an image appears with a face detection box if a face exists in the picture. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that there's some functionality here where we can detect what the user enters. And it's something that we've done before with React. When we had our RoboFriends app, we had our input that filtered through the robots. So again, using the similar technique, using the image link form, we can create this functionality. So the first thing you might realize is that, we definitely need state. We need to create a state so that our app knows what the value is that the user enters, remembers it, and updates it anytime it gets changed. So as you remember, in order to do that, we will define a constructor. And within this constructor, we have to call super to be able to use this. And here we can do this state equals, and we'll call it input. That's what the user will input. And this input will have a on change or on input change that we will use with arrow functions so that we don't get that error that we saw previously. And as you know, anytime there's some sort of an event listener on a web page, we receive an event and we want to do something here. So we'll do console.log event to make sure that we can detect it. And on input change, in the image link form, we can pass it as a prop. And we'll get the error on input change is not defined. Remember that because it's part of this class, to access it, you need to say this dot on input change, because on input change is a property of the app. Let's save that. And right now, well, it's not doing anything because we need to trigger this. If we go back to image link form, that's the CSS, image link form JS, we can destructure the on input change that we're getting. So instead of doing props dot on input change down here, we just destructure it from the props. And we can say on input here, on change. So on change is technically a React synthetic event that mimics what the HTML does with whenever input changes. And here, the on change, well, what's it going to do? If we just do on input change here, let's see what happens. I'm going to open up the console, click or press something. Go into the input and press something. All right, and it looks like I'm getting something, a proxy event. All right, what if I go back into my app.js? And if you remember, the way we get our value from the input is .target.value. If I save that and go back, there you go. We get our input. Nice and easy, just like we did before with our initial React app. All right, so we're getting the on input change. And we also want that when we click on detect that, well, we detect an image. How are we going to do that? For now, just because I like keeping things simple, building things one step at a time, we can just console log and we'll say on submit, and it won't have any parameters for now. We'll just say console.log, click. And now on submit, we can pass to our image link form again. We'll title it on button submit here just to make it clear. And again, we'll pass it with a this dot on button submit. If we save that, I'm going to put this on a new line just again so you can see. Now the image link form will receive on button submit. And we can say here that other than the class name, there'll be a on click event that listens for the on button submit. Let's save. Go back to our example, click. Look at that, it's working. All right, so there's a bit of functionality, but the hard part is just getting started. How do we display an image down here and have it detect the face? Well, luckily for us, we can use an API. And this API, I think, is one of the coolest out there. It's called Clarify. And as you can see from their tagline, understand your image and video data. You can use this tool actually for free up to a certain point. If you look at the pricing over here, for developers, you have a free 5,000 operations per month. So you can submit 5,000 pictures and it'll guess it for you. Once your app becomes popular, then you can start paying for it, but we're going to be using a free API. And I want you to sign up for this if you want to use it, because the API key that I'll use in this example, I'll delete it afterwards so that other people don't use it and I reach my limit and I won't be able to use it anymore. But it's very simple to sign up. You just log in, and once you create your account here, you'll be taken onto your profile. And they might already have my first application for you. If there's nothing here, you just click on Create New Application. And here, and your application, you can title it whatever you want, but you don't need to touch anything. If you go to API keys, this key is your way of accessing the Clarify API. So if here I enter a URL, I press detect, I can send that URL with my API key that they provide for you to their service. And using the API key, they'll say, oh, that's Andre. He's under the free plan. He hasn't hit his 5,000 limit yet for the month. Yes, let's respond. And in case you're wondering what they can actually do, if you go to their models, you see over here that they use machine learning to train something called models. That is, they train a computer by giving it many, many pictures, tons of pictures, to memorize celebrity faces, detect apparel, like here. And it knows that these are sunglasses with 100% probability because it's been trained probably millions of pictures of sunglasses to know what sunglasses are like. So you can play around with a lot of the stuff that they have here. It's really, really nice what they have. We're going to be using their face detection API. And their face detection API, we simply, if we go to the JS, we simply run this function to the Clarify servers using our own API, and it gives us a response or an error. Now, this is always a lot easier to demonstrate than to actually talk about. So let's implement it. I'm using their face recognition. So I'm just going to copy and paste this, go back to my app, and in app.js, I'll say that on button submit, I want to run the function that Clarify just told me to use. But as you can see here, it has app.models.predict. Well, how is my program going to know what app.models.predict is? Well, if you go to their API guide, it'll show you exactly how to get started and how to use their API. But you can see over here in their getting started API clients, if we go to JavaScript, it'll say install the client from npm. So let's just follow along and install Clarify. And this is a package that they've built so they can work with JavaScript. While that's loading, we can see that we can import Clarify. We can see here that they're using the common.js require way of importing, but since we're using create React app, we can use import here. And then we simply initialize your API key with this, so that now we'll be able to have the app object. As you can see here, we're using app.models, but if I run this, I'll have no idea what app is. Just to demonstrate for you, if I go back to the console here, run npm start, I get the app is not defined. All right, so again, copying what we see here, we'll copy this, put it up in our configuration at the top of the file. It asks for our API key. In my case, I'll use the one that they've given me. Let me open that link in a new file. If I go to my first application, API keys, I'll copy and paste my API key, paste it in here. Like we talked about in the API section, most useful APIs require a setup like this where you have to add an API key. So although these documents are specifically for Clarify, most APIs that you use are going to be very, very similar to this. All right, so we have that. We also need to import, if you remember. So going back here, I can just import Clarify. And because we can use the new JavaScript way of importing, we'll just do that because it looks so much nicer. All right, let's save and see what happens. All right, it looks like it's working. We see that we're just getting this is just a sample image that we're getting. So we're using our API key and then submitting a URL image and then having this dot then occur. Let's console.log the response and see what we get. I'm going to click submit and I get status. All right, it looks like it's responding with something. That's good. Very good. All right, so for now, it looks like this is working. We have an image that we're receiving. I'm going to put this on a new line so you can see. All right, so for now, let's have it so we can display whatever image they just gave us in our example. Let's just copy and see what this image is of. So we want this to display at the bottom. So how can we do that? Well, we can start creating our last face recognition component. So we can remove the brackets or the comments. And now here, we'll import this new component that we don't have yet. And this will be called the face recognition component. And again, we'll create a new folder that will say face recognition. And within this new folder, be a new file, face recognition.js. Using our very good tool, copy and paste. I'm going to copy and paste the navigation component. And now change the name of this to face recognition component. And what should this display? Well, for now, we just want to display a static image to make sure that it works. So I'm going to create a div with the class name of, well, center that we've already defined before, if you remember in our app.css. And we'll have an image with a source of, close the tag, and we can just save that. Let's see if that works. All right, that looks pretty good actually. We got our image right at the bottom. I get an error saying that we need an alt tag, so we'll just say alt. And we'll just leave it blank for now, just so we have something. All right, so we have the basic look of the image, and that's working, but that's not really connected to the API. When I click detect, well, it's just hard-coded. So first, let's look at the API and see how we can actually submit image URLs. If we go back to their documents, again, they're very, very good with this. If you scroll down, under the predict, you see that they have images and videos. So we can use the images via URL, and we see that we have the JavaScript, and it looks like the predict function takes the clarify a model that they have. So in this case, they're sending the general model and the URL. All right, so it's very similar to what we saw before. So by the looks of it, because we've already defined our API key, we don't need this anymore. All we need is to tell it what model do we want to use. But if you remember, they have a ton of models. And I actually want to show you a smart way of looking at this. They have this information in the docs, but another good way of doing it is, if you remember, there was a clarify npm package. And this npm package has a GitHub link, and all npm packages usually do. In here, if you go to, this is their code base. If you go into source, as you might remember, and index.js, this is what they're giving us access to. And you see over here, they have exports, global.clarify. And here are all their models that we can use. So they're giving us the general model, but you can see we can get the food model, the color model. So let's use the color model for now. And in here, we'll say color model. And in order to have access to that, we have to do clarify.color model. So let's save that. I'm going to test this by opening up the console, clicking detect. I get a response. And within their response, if I go to outputs, 0, data, I get colors. And these are all the hex colors predictions. And you see the one with the highest probability. Let's see what color that is. We're pretty much black. And if you look at this image, yeah, it's pretty much black. All right, so that is working. And the reason I was able to find this is, again, in their API documentation, it tells you if it's an outputs, and an output returns an array with data inside it. And because we selected the colors model, we get colors. All right, so for now, using the colors model, let's build it up. We want to have an image URL state, and it will be empty for now. And this image URL should get displayed when we click on submit. So we can say that on button submit, we want to this.set state to equal to have image URL updated with whatever the input is. So this way, we can pass the image URL down to the face recognition. So if I do image URL equals to this.state.image URL, I can now use image URL in my face recognition component as the source. Now, we obviously need to receive this, so I'm going to destructure it and use it as parameters. And I get input is not defined. That's because in here, I used input and, well, it needs to be this.state.input. Go back. Let's find a new face actually. Let's do a color. Let's do landscape. Let's do one with a defining color. That's a good one. Let's do view image. Copy this. If we do this, and we don't get anything because, well, if you remember on input change, we've never actually updated the input component. We just console logged everything. So now that we know that, we can just say this.setState input is the event target.value. Let's see if that works. I'm going to go back, try it out, and oh boy, that's a big picture. We'll need to fix that, but we got our image displaying. Now, using this information, it means that we can give our URL as the input over here. We can just put this.state.input. And open up the console. All right, looks like we're getting a response. We're getting data, colors. We have this with 48% chance of this being the color. Let's see what color that is. All right, it's green. That's pretty cool. So it's clearly working. We're getting, I'm going to close some of these. All right, things are clearly working now, which is great. Now, the one trick I want to show you, because of the way React works, if I would have done here image URL, I would actually get an error. So if I copy and paste, let's do an image apple. I get a bad request. And that is because of the way setState works. All right, so what we actually want to use is the face detect model. So using what we have now, let's see if we can get a response for, and if we go to our API, we can look at the models. And actually, if we go to the top, we go to models, and we go to face detection, we see that we'll have a response that looks something like this. What we're interested in is from the outputs to get data and then regions that give us the regions or the bounding box of the face. So let's see if we can get that working. I've put the face detection model, and we don't know what the response is going to be yet, so I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to find a face image. Let's do this picture, copy and paste, detect. Oh boy, we need to fix that face. But we see that we're getting output. In the first array, we get data, regions, and we have a bounding box. So it's a little bit nested here. So using this information, let's clean it up a little bit and then actually get what we need from here. In our case, it looks like we'll need to get response dot outputs, and then the 0, the first array. Then it was data, regions, 0, region info, then bounding box. All right, let's do that. So data, regions, access the first array, region info, and I think the last one was bounding box. Let's try that. All right, let's give that a go and see if that works. Detect. Look at that. We have our bottom row, left column, right column, top row. We still don't really know what these numbers mean. We'll have to actually figure it out because, as you can see, it doesn't add anything to the face. That's something that we'll have to do. But it's working. And we got our API connection. We're actually doing something. We're displaying the image. So before we get into the next video, let's fix this image issue to make sure that everything looks better than this. So if we go to the face recognition here, there's a couple of things that we will need to fix. I'm going to remove this console. We'll do MA, which is a tachyon class, and then we'll also wrap this in a div. And there's many ways to do this, like I said before, with styling. I'll show you the main way of doing it. I'm going to say absolute margin top 2, just so there's a bit of a space in between the input and the image. And now within the image, we want to make sure that the width is always the same, no matter the size of the picture. We'll do 500 pixels, but we also don't want it to get squished or have weird proportions. So the way to fix that is to do auto. So height is automatically going to be adjusted based on the width. So let's save and see what happens now. All right, that's a lot better. So that was pretty quick. This was the main thing that really fixed it. All right, awesome. So we got ourselves a working app that returns real results. And now we can work on having a box displayed around the face if something gets detected. Just out of curiosity, if I do landscape again, all right, everything's working fine. Whew, that was a long one, but things are starting to work. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.